I had my pot of gold set aside, thank God. And then we started cash flow pretty quickly. But if I didn't work that thing backwards, I would have been in trouble for sure.
Tyler, I just got to say this. You probably should have used a franchise advisor.
I know. I should have, right? I didn't know they existed back then. The number one question we get is, can I replace my income with a franchise? So we work with three types of clients. We've got a portfolio client who has multiple businesses. We've got the client who has a 9-to-5 who loves their job, wants a side business. We've got the client who doesn't like their 9-to-5 and they want to leave and they need cash flow. They need to replace that income. So big question, Ryan, can it be done with a franchise?
Well, the short answer is yes. There's 800,000 franchises out there and many people making livings off of them, right? So it's a great question to ask. Before we get into the actual formula that we would recommend you use, know that in validation, we encourage you to get a sense of when cash flow will happen in a business, right? Some businesses are going to cash flow very early, first 3-6 months. Other businesses may take a year, 2 years, right? So you have to first get a sense of what's my budget, when's my cash flow coming out of my business before you can use this formula. Also, we're just going to go over this at kind of a high level today. We've got a resource that will walk you through step by step. You could put in your own numbers, use the resources to determine your exact number that you have available and what you need that franchise to replace for you. But let's get started. So first two questions somebody needs to ask themselves before they get into the actual formula. Number one, are you going to live the same way or cut back? Right? You're going to stay in the same home, you're going to have the same expenses, or are you going to be able to scale back a little bit? Number two, do you have any major life events coming up? A major life event doesn't mean don't do this, but make sure you inform everyone as you go through the process that I'm going to buy a home, I'm going to get married, I'm going to get divorced, something like that. Because if that surprise happens in the middle of this process, it's almost always a full stop, right? Okay, so number one, cash position. This is simple. What do we got in our pot of gold, right? How much is sitting there that we have available to dip into if we need to because our income isn't covering our expenses? Nice and simple. Number two, income. So are you keeping a job? Is your spouse keeping a job? Are you both keeping a job or neither of you keeping a job, right? Just determine what is your after-tax income, W-2 income, if you will.
Make sure that W-2 is not going to change. Like make sure on the horizon, there's not like and you got a pretty good sense of that, right? If you have a W-2 job, like, is there an acquisition coming? Are they in sales? Is it going to be up or down? Is it, there's tons of scenarios, but have a good feel for if that income is going to change that W-2 job.
Yeah, 100%. And that goes into the next level of income as well, which is rental income, investment income, loans due to you. My advice actually would be the way that the investment income looks right now, we've got so much volatility in the market right now. I would say maybe don't use your investments as an idea of what your income is going to look like. Use rental, use loans due to you, things like that. So we take our W-2 income, reliable W-2 after-tax income, and we take any other income coming in, and that's what we have. So we've got our pot of gold, our cash available, and our income coming in. Okay, we can't exceed that, right? So then we got to determine expenses. And again, we've got a resource that'll walk you through this in detail, but at a high level, we want to know what is our annual expenses, right? Mortgage, utilities, car, things like that, insurance. We want to know what our tax advantage expenses are. These are going to be things like we are funding a retirement account. We are funding a college account. Our recommendation is don't stop funding those things. Entrepreneurship's number one financial thing for me, right? That's going to be your highest priority. However, let's not sacrifice the other things that we're trying to do in our life to create wealth, which is tax advantage investments. Number three is going to be voluntary expenses. Now, my advice would be cut all of these out. Can you cut out buying a new car? Can you cut out a vacation? Can we not do the remodel this year, but wait a little while? If you can cut voluntary expenses out, that's the best way to go about this.
And that's a great test to think about. Like, can you do that as a family? Is your significant other on board? Is your family on board? Because this is going to look like this going forward for maybe a year or two, right? As you build a business, you've got to pour resources into that business. So it's a good stress test for the family, I think.
Yeah, you got it. And then the last bucket of expenses is unexpected. Unexpected happens. We've got a medical issue. We've got a job loss, whatever that is. Let's go ahead and make sure that we have, plenty set aside for unexpected. I don't know if you're going to look at maybe 10% of your overall annual expenses, maybe 6 months of expenses, whatever is most important to you, make sure that you have something sitting there on this side. So again, we are just sort of generalizing on this video. You take your cash, you add it to your income, you subtract your expenses, right? It's basic math when it comes to budgeting. And then there's really two scenarios that you can think about. So are you going to use cash plus income, or do you want to do this in a way that is only going to use your income and not your cash? So this is why it's important to know your criteria going in. If you tell an advisor, this is my investment parameters, this is how much working capital I have, that advisor can then guide you into a franchise that's going to be able to fit within that. But if you say, hey, this is all I have, and I want to use my cash, it's going to change or open up the types of franchises we can recommend. Go into it with a plan, communicate that plan well to your advisor, then we'll make sure that we recommend the right types of franchises. Great. So with that, nothing better to do now than just talk about our own experiences in this. So Tyler, one thing I wanted to ask you is, when you opened your first franchise, talk to us a little bit about your own personal cash position and how you thought about what you needed from the franchise.
Okay, so yeah, let me paint the picture of like what I did. So I was 29 years old. My partner at the time, we had 2 restaurants, right? So we saw this concept, we really loved it. It was more passion for me because I didn't love the restaurant business, but I did love health and fitness. So I saw this concept, I loved it. So, we went through the due diligence process. I didn't use an advisor, didn't use any consultant. Went over to the home location, bought 5 territories, came back, and then got to figure out how to fund it, right? So for me, I didn't do it correctly. So what I had to do, I got to build out this pro forma. Then I got to figure out the cash flow. So I had to pull money out of my current business. We got the 5 territories locked down, and then we had to sell the current business all while building the new business. So, and I moved across the country. So I moved from Iowa to Virginia to open these locations. I get there, I don't have a lease signed yet for my first location. I got to wait an entire year. So thank God the business got sold. I had my pot of gold set aside, thank God. And then we started cash flow pretty quickly. But if I didn't work that thing backwards, I would have been in trouble for sure.
Tyler, I just got to say this. You probably should have used a franchise advisor.
I know. I should have, right? I didn't know they existed back then. I was just, young, green on the ears, man. I didn't know that. But what about you, Ryan? What was that first stab at this? When did you do this?
Let's see, I was 25 when I opened my first franchise. And, actually, again, going back to, I wish I had somebody guiding me. I made some mistakes. One of them was I bought more locations than I had the ability to afford, which, lucky for me, the first franchise cash flow very quickly. But I had a major shift in events or turn of events after I opened my franchise. I love this experience, but I left a job that I also loved, right? At the time, I was 24, making over 6 figures, which was a lot for me back then. I loved my boss. I loved my coworkers, and it was really hard. I was looking at this scenario like, I love what I do, but do I want to do it forever? And the answer for me was no, right? So I bought a fitness franchise, and I left a job making over 6 figures. And my goal was that I wanted to be an owner operator. So I was driving out there every day. I was doing the pre-sales. I've talked to you and the team a lot about how much I loved those days. However, it shifted on me quickly because the company that I previously worked for, the owner of that, he called me and he said, I want you back. And I said, I want to be an entrepreneur. And he said, that's what I'm talking about. Will you come be my partner? And I said, now we're talking. So I then got put into a situation where I had to immediately go from an owner operator to a semi-absentee. So I had called somebody in my network and I had said, what do you think about coming in here and running this thing? So he relocated to Fremont, Nebraska, and he started to become the general manager. So now, I remember the numbers vividly because I was so focused on him. He made a $40,000 salary and he participated in a 5% profit share. My monthly expenses at this fitness center was around $8,000 a month, right? And so I had around, let's call it $150,000 a year of expenses. I was going back to a job where I was now going to make about $120,000 a year. My life was very affordable at the time, so I didn't have a lot of life expenses. So I covered a significant portion of the business expenses with my W-2 income. And of course, being an owner over there had a lot of advantages as well. But my W-2 income could cover a lot of that. So when you think about this exercise that you go through, I was fortunate it cash flowed quickly, but I also knew that if it didn't, I had plenty in my pot of gold, as I called it earlier, plus my income to cover those expenses for a period of time while I could wait for cash flow. And it worked out well. Ultimately, we turned that into 4 total units and had a great exit. So I was really happy that it worked out the way that it did. Well, Tyler, I'm glad it worked out for you. I love hearing your franchise story. I like sharing my franchise story. It's what we do every day. We help people find the right franchise for them. If you want to hear more about our journeys and what we do over here at Franchise Sidekick, go ahead and subscribe. And if you want to engage with one of our franchise advisors, go to our website in the link below, schedule a 10-minute phone call, and it could change your life.